to advance. What are some of the barriers to recognizing it? Well, first of all, etiology or diagnosis. All too often we're handed an evaluation that says language disability or autism or any number of other diagnoses. Diagnoses might be important, but at the same time they can be a barrier. And my modifiability suggests that you really interact with each learner so that you begin to understand to what extent is this person able to behave, function in different arenas, perhaps under using different modalities, using different stimuli. Secondly, the whole question of age. That past a certain age you can't learn, or a critical period. These are psychological expectations that often impede one from pushing or from thinking, well, we can find ways to modify. This also has to do with the family. I think it's essential, and you see this also in the more recent legislation, to understand the learner within the context of family, the needs, the beliefs. Also, as mentioned in the Desire Torah, the phenomenal changes that were seen in Ben's Bar Mitzvah. You also see a certain self-awareness, a change in expectations and beliefs. Now, this requires a great deal of assessment. In other words, the whole learning process is one in which educators are constantly trying to see what the limits are. In other words, we tend to think of assessment in static terms. We measure something and we get a number. Dynamic assessment, which is Feuerstein's contribution in part, says that assessment cannot be static. In other words, you have to see and interact with the person across a number of different settings. By the same token, we have to take into consideration what the realities of the settings are. All too often, we're not terribly realistic about what we can do, what resources are needed. We might speak the line of inclusion, but we neglect to really understand what that will entail, both in terms of resources, human resources, financial resources, materials, and that really varies depending on the types of settings you're talking about. One of the things that Henry pointed to was that this young man was and self-assured as a young adult. To a large extent, we call that self-efficacy, a sense of being able to do, a belief about one's capacity to perform specific tasks, settings. It really differs from self-esteem, which deals with the whole notion of a person's sense of self-worth, which I'm really not going to get into. But all too often, we tend to focus extensively on being self-worth without thinking about or thinking about self-efficacy as opposed to self-worth. I'm going to move ahead here to the next data. So now we focus on the family, the learner. We also need to understand the task at hand. What's really required? And I just close with a very brief anecdote. This morning, when I was getting on the subway, a woman who didn't seem to know how to use the metro. We have these passes that you need to use on buses and on subways. She had change, but had no idea what to do with it. She didn't know what the task at hand was. And you can say, well, perhaps she came from another city, another culture. Well, probably that's true, but as an instructor, I tend to we have to look at tasks and really break them down and begin to think what's really involved. What's involved for someone who's never seen a metro, never seen the way gain entry into a subway. So with that, Luz, I'll be happy to entertain questions later on in the session. Now we're going to turn it over to
So, Dr. Kohl, Dr. Davidson, thank you so much for talking with us about what to think about when thinking about inclusion and what it means and what our goals are. So now I would like to, first of all, before I introduce Dory, I just want to give another reminder. Please, if you are not Dory, please make sure that your phone is on mute so that we can make sure that we're doing this without interruption. So I would like to take the opportunity. I'm very, very glad that Dory has been able to join us. Dory Fruman-Kirshner is currently the Executive Director of Matan. Prior to joining the Matan team, Dory was at UJA State Federation of New York for 7 years in both planning as well as fundraising capacity. Dory served as Director of the Jewish Leadership Forum, a department which seeks to cultivate and engage the next generation of philanthropic leaders, raising $3 million annually from fewer than 80 donors. Dory began her professional career at the Solomon Schechter School of Manhattan as a bilingual, with both Hebrew and English, educator. Upon completion of her MA in education from the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. Dory received her BA in Sociology and Judaic Studies from Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, and Dory is married to Rabbi David S. Kirshner, lives in New Jersey with her husband and 2 children. She will now about a special listeners. I'm going to turn this over to Dory.